Hi, I'm Robin Davis. I coordinate volunteers and events at NEA BPD, and it's my pleasure to welcome you today. Our webinar is Real Skills for Real Life, a conversation with Shireen and Jesse. The National Education Alliance for Borderline Personality Disorder is a nonprofit organization that provides education, raises public awareness and understanding, decreases stigma, promotes research, and enhances the quality of life of those affected by borderline personality disorders and related problems, including chronic emotion dysregulation. We have the largest virtual resource library online with information related to BPD. We bring together clinicians, researchers, people with lived experience, and family members at conferences around the world. Our signature program is Family Connections, which is a 12-week course for caregivers of individuals with BPD to learn psychoeducation, skills, and receive support. We also have a course for parents in distress due to their child's previous suicide attempt, self-harm, or other dangerous behaviors, and this is called Managing Suicidality and Trauma Recovery Course. Please feel free to check us out at our website, www.neabpd.org. We just have a few housekeeping messages before we begin today's webinar. This program is being recorded and will be uploaded to our website, usually in about 3 to 5 business days. Your video has been disabled and all participants are on mute. Please submit your questions through the Q&A and not the chat. Presenters will answer as many questions as time permits. Please keep your questions specific to the presentation topic, as this is not the forum to ask for advice for a personal situation you may be experiencing. The opinions expressed today are those of the speakers, and they do not necessarily represent the views of NEA BPD. This webinar is not intended to be political or to be therapy or a substitute for therapy. As an education-based nonprofit, this is meant to be educational. We do not intend that anything said will be triggering, and we ask you to exercise self-care if you do find something triggering. Please sign off immediately and tend to your needs. 988 is available in the US 24/7 as a resource. Please reach out to your mental health provider or your support system if needed. And now I'd like to turn it over to today's host, Andrea Gold, who will introduce our presenters.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for signing on. So we have the pleasure to get to speak with and learn from two of my DBT heroes, Dr. Shireen Rizvi and Dr. Jesse Finkelstein. And so what we're going to do is talk to them about two new books that came out in the DBT world and really get to know not just real skills for real life, but my hope, Jesse and Shireen, today is we can hear how you guys as real people use the skills yourself. You can see on the screen, everybody, that we've got I thought there was a link to order. You will be getting a link to order, but there's also a promo code if you're interested in buying these two books. And it does help as you're listening and you're interested in checking out these books to please consider putting a rating, especially if you order through Amazon, or give a review for other people to learn about these resources. So to introduce our speakers, Dr. Rizvi is, in addition to being one of my DBT heroes, also the Director of Psychology Training and the Director of DBT Services and Research at Montefiore, which she joined just a couple years ago. January, not even a full year. And before that, she had led DBT services over at Rutgers University. At Rutgers, Dr. Rizvi and Dr. Finkelstein together created a resource that I probably share with every family I work with doing DBT, the DBT RU video library that's on YouTube. And if you're interested in learning more about any DBT skill, you need a refresher, or you want to teach it to someone else, I highly recommend checking out the DBT RU page on YouTube. Dr. Finkelstein, Jesse, has recently moved or is in the process of moving from Columbia University to his own practice, Axis CBT. They are both in New York City. And although I love Rhode Island, I'm a little jealous of New York City for having both of these people in one place. Jesse is also the co-founder of TheraHive, and he has an excellent website called talkisgood.org where you can get more information on skills, and another resource that I love, the DBT game that we use in therapy and families can use in real life to practice these skills. So as we get started with this conversation today, as you have questions for Dr. Rizvi and Dr. Finkelstein, please put them in the Q&A and we'll do our best to answer them. And the first one coming up is being asked if this is recorded. Yes, it will. And you can share this on YouTube in addition to those DBTRU skills videos. I also want us to orient and get a sense of who's here and how we're all connected. So we're sharing a poll. If you could please respond to the poll to share what is your connection to BPD and chronic motion dysregulation, to click that on the screen right now. Okay. So welcome, Jesse and Shireen. We're going to talk about the two books. Let's start with one that Dr. Rizvi is a co-author on, the revised DBT Skills Training Manual. And Shireen, could you tell us about what's new in this revised edition, what people need to know, and particularly for those of us who might be on the fence about buying it, what's in it for us to check it out?
Sure. And also, just to be very clear, I'm not a co-author on that revision. So I'm a contributor to that edition. So what happened was the last edition of the Skills Manual was published in 2015. And what Guilford, 9 or 10 years later, approached a group of us to say that they've been getting a lot of comments from people about the manual not being current and not being super accessible and inclusive. A lot of the language was outdated, and perhaps did not attend as much to different aspects of identity and culture, which some might argue were kind of blind spots in the original teaching manual. So they approached a group of us that have all worked with Marcia for years, if not decades. So people that have all been very close to the development. We were all involved in some way with the revised manual in 2015. And they approached us and asked if we would be willing to help to update and revise the manual. So something to be very clear about to everybody on this call is that there are no new skills. Nor did we do anything new with the treatment of DBT. Instead, what we did was we went through, actually, we first asked a student of mine, I just want to give a shout out to Alejandra Sanchez Sarmiento, because she actually went line by line through the hundreds of pages of the DBT skills manual to identify language that was outdated, anything that was confusing, anything that didn't seem very inclusive, opportunities for adding more to be more inclusive. And then a group of us, and just to name them, Kate Comtois, Emily Cooney, Katie Korslin, Janice Quo, Jill Rathis, Jennifer Sayers, and myself, we used what she had identified and we made updates. And then Guilford did, the final review of that. The other major change is that instead of having all the handouts in front loaded and then all the worksheets after that, they're now put together so that there's a handout that teaches a skill and then immediately the worksheets that are the homework for those skills follow. So that might be too in the weeds for folks on this call who are family members. But I would say if you are new to DBT, you probably want to get the revised manual because it's the most current, has the most updated language, and will help you learn it and think about discussion points that are more current.
On the topic of skills, Shireen, there was a problem with the book. You guys went to problem solving, and thank you for contributing to make this revised edition happen. I'm wondering, in the process of working on the revision, if there were any challenges you faced, and maybe if you can give us an example of a skill you used.
Well, we faced thousands of problems in terms of a constant tension between how much do we want to change versus how much do we want to keep as is. Now, there's some updated, or sorry, I keep saying updated instead of outdated. There's some outdated language that was easy for us to identify. Like people don't use chalkboards anymore, really. And so,
CD-ROMs.
or CD-ROMs. So, those were things that we could change, right? And we could all agree that we wanted to change. But then there were other things that were a little bit more complicated about whether we wanted to change them. And in particular, I would say that some of these are Marcia-isms. So any of you who have met Marcia, know Marcia, have watched any of her videos that exist, know that she is one of a kind. She's kooky. She uses crazy examples sometimes. And we wanted to preserve that in the book. So, people have always said, for example, that the positive events checklist, this is in emotion regulation, where people can get ideas for what they want to do to increase joy in their lives. We have always heard from people from the beginning of time uh, lots of judgments about things that are on that list, right? And there are some things that we would all be like, why is this on this list? Why isn't this? And I think that's part of the essence of that skill, increasing positive events, is to really think outside the box, to identify things that maybe you wouldn't ordinarily think about. And there were things that felt kind of Marcia-ish that we wanted to keep in there to preserve the essence of the treatment, even if we know that there might be people rolling their eyes at some of those things. So I would say there were some, dialectical tensions there, but really, I mean, ultimately, probably the skill we used most often was wise mind. Like, how do we approach this? How do we find the synthesis here? How do we preserve Marcia and the integrity of the treatment while also making it updated so that new people to DBT aren't turned off by the language?
So you used Wise Mind as a skill, and I like how you said we. You had a group of people working together, and when we've got people interacting, people could have different perspectives and different opinions. And I'm wondering, and I'm going to open this to you, Shireen and Jesse, what you would say to folks asking, well, what do you do if my Wise Mind disagrees with yours? How did you navigate that in the revised edition with your co-contributors? And I'm wondering if you and Jesse could speak to if there were cases where you had tensions, you guys disagreed. What did you do if your own Wise Mind, you guys either couldn't identify it or you weren't on the same page? What did you do?
Well, I think we did have moments with the skills manual revision, some disagreements about words and word choices and what words are being. We didn't want the book to be outdated within the next year, right? And there's a lot of words in our culture right now, or language in our culture, that might not have lasting power and might not stick around. And we also wanted, the other thing is that people would bring up, well, we're talking a lot about identity, and identity is very important, and intersectionality is very important. And we also want to reach the folks who, if I could just say this, like, live in red states, don't want to think about identity, voted for, somebody we wouldn't want to vote for personally, because we want this to be we believe skills can help everybody, right? So we had to really thread the needle about how to write about this where anybody could pick it up and feel like it's for them. And I would say, just as a segue, that was definitely our mission, Jesse and my mission, with writing the new book, which is really written for people to learn skills. The manual was written for people in DBT, with DBT therapists. I think obviously people are using it in all sorts of ways beyond that. But we wanted to write a book that was simpler, more accessible, and could immediately teach somebody how to do DBT skills, even if they aren't in DBT, right? And yes, Jesse, did we have disagreements about things?
I was kind of thinking about this. Like, I'm sure we did. So this is
Oh, we did. You're not remembering?
I have a very this is the wonderful thing about my experience. I don't remember anything. In my mind I was like, this was the most seamless process. I was and I don't know. I imagine if we how can I say this? I think the way that I oriented myself to the process, to like us collaborating, is holding whatever truth I was connected to somewhat flexibly. I mean, partly because like I have so much respect for Shireen's vision, and I was just like, okay, between the two of us, something interesting will happen. Shireen, am I like completely misremembering this experience?
Well, no, I think overall we had a good time, but I'm thinking I can't think of specific examples, but there were some like words that you put in, and I'm like, no way, we're not using those words. Like, I can't remember what they are now, but like words that I was like, I would never use. Do you remember what they are?
I think there was probably a word that I did not intend to use, that snuck in which I then experienced some maybe guilt or embarrassment afterwards, and was quick to remove it. Otherwise, beyond that, no, I think I was a perfect collaborator and everything I did was right. Next question, Andrea.
I imagine you guys used a lot of skills in writing this book. So Shireen and Jesse, it sounds like the revised edition is for people in DBT, whereas your book, The Real Skills for Real Life, is really to get them out to everybody, including people who are not in therapy or have maybe no interest in being therapy. I want to ask a question that I asked Shireen. The first webinar you and I did together for NEA BPD was when your first book came out, which is Chain Analysis in DBT. This was maybe, I don't know what year that was, but at least 7 years ago, I want to say. And I said, what made you write this book? What got you interested in writing this book? And I remember your answer was very reasonable mind of, well, Guilford asked me to, and I had written an article about it. What I want to ask both of you today is why this book, why Real Skills for Real Life, and why now to write this book?
I think that the origin of the book sort of came back to that collaboration that you mentioned regarding the DBTRU videos and sort of seeing the popularity of those videos. And I think Shireen and I both have always sort of had in mind like this idea that these skills are skills that we use. We've seen how they have benefited our own lives, the lives of the people that we work with. And we want to make them as accessible as, and not just accessible, because I think that sometimes that can be sort of a low barometer for therapists. It's desirable. Like, how do we create, material that people actually want to engage with? And I think that was principally was like, okay, these skills are fabulous. How do we then sort of format them and sort of distribute them in a way that people want to bring into their lives?
I really, really like that answer because I didn't think of that as one of your reasons. And for DBT nerds out there or DBT clinicians, and for those of you who don't know, to do DBT, you got to do 5 things and hit 5 functions. One of them is teaching capabilities and skills for effective behaviors. Another one is to increase people's motivation to do the effective behaviors. And I hear you say, sometimes the way DBT is out there might not hook people or be a little boring, and you wanted to bring up that motivation. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
or it's just too intimidating to approach, right? So, I mean, this is, I think, uh, I agree 100% with Jesse that the success of our videos that we really threw together in a couple of months, it's kind of a miracle. And every once in a while, I check the stats on YouTube and we're up to 3.4 million views of those videos, which is just incredible. And they've been translated into different languages. So they're out there as a resource for people. And we knew when we made them, that we wanted to put them out there for people as a resource. So I definitely agree with Jesse about that being the impetus for working on this book. And I will say that from that experience, and also just from working with Jesse, is this is the brilliance of Jesse, which is how do you think about graphic design? How do you think about visualization? How do you think about font? Oh my gosh, we had so many conversations about font. And recognizing that there's a psychology in all of that, right? What is appealing to people? What are they more likely to be engaged with? What's going to be something that they want to pursue? And it's something that for those of us on the call that were trained in doctoral programs for psychology, we did not think a single thing about that. And that's the problem. I mean, that's one of the major problems with evidence-based therapies like DBT, is that most of the world do not know about them because we have not been good at making them appealing or marketing them. So that was another reason for this book.
You've already touched on this. What else would you say to people who are wondering what's different about your book, Real Skills, from other DBT books out there?
I, well, I don't know any other deep. No, no. I think one, we went into it with this very specific orientation that this was for folks who were not just familiar with DBT. This was really for everyone. So how do we frame the skills? How do we communicate the skills in ways that, to Shireen's earlier point, folks aren't going to find intimidating, that they don't necessarily feel like they have to read the book cover to cover in order to engage with. They can literally open up and find, and we actually have like these, what we call like pathways, where people can sort of identify something that they're struggling with, and then sort of from there identify a skill that could be helpful in that moment. So really, like, I think one of the things that makes this book unique is that we were orienting ourselves to how do we capture the essence, the function, the impact of DBT skills and deliver it in a way that people can, no matter where they are in their lives and their familiarity with DBT, engage with the material easily and playfully.
So you've got the word real in the title twice. It's also in your game, the game of real life. One thing I really like about DBT is the focus on precision, clarity, and defining terms in behavioral, non-judgmental ways. What do each of you mean by the word real and how it applies to skills?
Oh, Andrea, we talked about the title so much. uh, so much. And I actually, can I confess that I had a preferred title that we couldn't use? Can I say it? Can I just say it, Jesse? Which is the preferred title that I had. Actually, I don't even know if it was fully fleshed out, but something like Skills for Extraordinary Living, with extraordinary having a parentheses so that it was extraordinary, like Skills for Ordinary Living. So what I wanted to say is that we're all, I know, but here's why we couldn't do it, Andrea. We couldn't do it because of the parentheses. Apparently parentheses throw everything off when it comes to indexing, marketing, whatever. So this was also a long discussion, and I think we landed on something that is really good. But I bring that up because what we're trying to convey is, like, we all live ordinary lives. We could all benefit from using skills in our ordinary lives. And there are ways in which using DBT skills will help our ordinary moments become more extraordinary, right? And then we're thinking real skills for real life is a way of conveying, again, I think, it's odd for me to think about being in the self-help space, because I feel like there's so much ineffective stuff in that space. But this book is a self-help book for people to learn the skills. And we wanted to stay true to DBT, which is that we're not promising that if you do this, you won't have any problems anymore. Your life will be perfect. You'll be happy all the time. And I think there's
That
a
ain't
lot of
real life.
well, of course, but I think a lot of self-help books subtly or not so subtly market that, right? Because that's how they want to sell their books or become famous or whatever. So we're saying, no, we all, and this is included in our intro, we all struggle on a day-to-day basis just with the challenges of everyday life, real life. And this idea of real skills is bringing in this notion that these are evidence-based, scientifically driven skills. They're not things that we just made up off the top of our heads, but that they have foundations in science and facts of research.
I think just building on that, like I think to Shireen's point that there's a way that some self-help books sort of like the recommendations feel so abstract, where because these are grounded in evidence-based, sort of operationalized behavioral interventions, they're sort of quote unquote real in that respect. Like we're not sort of offering sort of just abstract phrases that you can interpret and sort of like no, like we offer really specific things that a person can do to hopefully reduce the suffering in their life.
Thank you for sharing the preferred title, Shireen. I will share. I felt a moment of joy and liking it, and then a moment of disappointment that wasn't it. And seems like you and Jesse practice reality acceptance and effectiveness, and that there is this.
Me more than him, I'd say.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a judgment.
Because I was more attached to it.
I see.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Well, it makes sense to grieve that if that's what you wanted, right? And it didn't fit reality. I really like that. And I like this idea of ordinary because it acknowledges how DBT helps with everyday problems. And I also think there is a way with BPD and chronic emotion dysregulation that something that might seem like an ordinary problem or not a big deal may actually bring up big emotions or judgments, self-judgments, and then that can lead to invalidation. And so I'm wondering how you guys figured out how to write one book for everybody where it's applicable for people who have different reactions to different ordinary problems, where some people reading it may not be emotionally sensitive and some might be exquisitely sensitive. Could you speak to that tension?
I think that's a fabulous question, and I want to highlight like the origins of DBT. The development of the treatment was for a population of folks who tend to experience emotion dysregulation, who we've conceptualized as having an emotional vulnerability. And so then the question is, and maybe this is sort of a little bit what you're asking, was say, okay, like this was created for this population. What is maybe the applicability to the broader public as well? And I would say a couple of things. I think one, like practically, like there's a lot of orientation in the book to what skills will be helpful depending on the intensity of what you're feeling. And you'll see this in sort of our pathways where we ask certain questions like, okay, how intense is this emotion right now? How tolerable? And then depending on how you answer that, various skills will be available to you to pick from. So that was one way we tried to capture that experience. I think the other thing is, um, you know, these are life skills. And we know that, like, for instance, the modules within DBT speak to various, let's say, degrees or intensity of emotion or how intense we want to respond to that emotion. And so, while maybe some skills within the book will be less applicable to folks, there is something for everyone within there, I would say, but everyone might be not. I mean, for most people, 99%, I don't
I would just add that I actually didn't find that part, like that question where you're saying, how do we write it so that it's applicable for everybody? I didn't find that to be that challenging. And the reason, I mean, maybe we'll get feedback that we didn't hit the mark there, but the reason, I've been teaching these skills for 25 years, learned directly from Marcia, have taught these skills to God knows how many people by now. And the way I teach the skills to people who have borderline personality disorder and are in a DBT skills group, and the way I teach the skills to clinicians who are coming to a DBT training, and the way I teach the skills to friends or family members who want to hear more about it, it's actually the same. So I don't have a version that I only teach to people with BPD. I don't have a version that I teach to only people who don't have BPD. So I thought that speaks to the universality of these skills. And I don't think that was as much of an issue. I mean, sometimes I think we're like, what's the best example here that will be relatable to the most people? But in terms of describing the skills themselves, I'm hoping that everybody sees their utility no matter what their background or experiences are.
And we are all human beings who still have emotions. So I have a question now from one of our audience members that I'm hoping I can ask you guys to answer in a way that's like a preview of how you talk about it in your book. The question is, can you give it specific examples of what Wise Mind includes? Person saying, I guess it's based on mindfulness, but how do you talk about Wise Mind? How do you teach something that can feel like an abstract concept in your book?
So, I mean, I'll sort of give the two-part answer here. First, like just discussing like what technically is Wise Mind. And Wise Mind falls within the mindfulness module, and it is what we understand to be the synthesis between emotion mind and reasonable mind. And in the book, I'm trying to think if we offer a specific example in terms of Wise Mind in particular. No. And I do remember what I found to be a pretty instructive example that Shireen offered in terms of Wise Mind. Shireen, I don't know if you remember this, but maybe basically the experience of, let's say you're walking by a dog's like where do you get a kennel?
Pet store? A kennel?
Pet store, a kennel. Let's, save dogs. That, yeah. You're walking by a kennel, and all of a sudden you experience just this profound, intense urge to just go in there and get all of the puppies. You're like, these puppies are the cutest things in the world. I want all of them, right? And that's like sort of this experience of emotion mind. It feels hot. You have a short-term desire, like you're thinking in terms of a short-term want. And then you walk in and all of a sudden reasonable mind hits and it's like, I don't want to pick up after 15 dogs. Like, this is a terrible idea. I've got a life. I've got things I got to do. I'm going to leave this pet store right now and get back to life. And that's like sort of reasonable mind coming in. It's just like it's like cold. We're separating the emotion away. We're thinking about the long-term consequences. So then we think about the synthesis. And by synthesis, this is, Andrea, something you and I have talked a lot about. We're not talking about compromise. We're talking about how can we validate the truths of both experiences and then arrive at a new truth. Something that weaves together these these notions, these truths for yourself, and then helps you arrive at a new sort of orientation. So that could look like, well, okay, you know what? Maybe I'll think about getting one puppy and I'll consult with my partner to see that if that's within sort of our responsibilities. So I'm not totally foreclosing the plan. And one thing I want to highlight is that like Wise Mind could look different for different people on the circumstance. But essentially what we are looking to do is arrive at this place that recognizes the truth of these two different states. Anything, folks, that you feel like I'm missing here?
I don't think you're missing anything from that, but I did want to orient people who might be having questions about how we're teaching or talking about specific skills to how we laid out the book, because I'm realizing most people probably don't have the book in their hand like I do as we're talking about this a little bit abstractly. So, it's a pretty lean paperback book. It's 158 pages. And we offer, in addition to the pathways that Jesse talks about, we take 26 of the DBT skills. And these were, there's more than 26 in the DBT skills manual, but these were the skills that we thought would be the most important for people to learn. And each skill has its own section where we describe what it is. We say why one would use it. We say when to use it versus when not to use it. We say how to know if it's working. And that's the foundation of everything. And then we have a couple of pages of illustrated guides on how to practice. So if you go, by the way, to our YouTube site, I put the promo video from Guilford onto our YouTube site, and it showcases some of these pages so that you could see what it looks like, because these are the illustrations that Jesse worked on so beautifully. And it really provides this step-by-step guide. Here's how to practice any one of these skills.
And I think one thing to that point that we were thinking about was like, folks learn in so many different ways. And so we were trying to sort of capture that, right? It's like people read, they like graphics, they like videos, they like sort of, you know, conversations, etc. And so we were thinking, okay, how else can we pass along this information?
So speaking about learning, one of our audience members asked, in response to bringing up how you guys considered the font, were you also considering people with learning differences? And this person was also curious about overlap with DBT and learning differences such as dyslexia or dysgraphia.
Do you mean BPD and learning
The person
disabilities?
asked for
Oh,
DBT, but I am
yeah.
wondering if maybe it might have been BPD. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually not aware of that research myself personally, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were high rates of overlap, in part because of what the biosocial theory that informs DBT and basically is the explanation for how people go on to develop chronic emotion dysregulation, suggests that one piece of the puzzle is the experience of invalidation by the environment. And if you have a learning disability, especially if it's undiagnosed or you're a kid, and the environment does not understand or appreciate that learning disability, you're going to receive invalidation. So I don't know the data on like what percent of people with BPD also have a learning disability, but I would suspect that it's higher than the general population for sure. The question about did we keep that in mind? I would say the short answer is probably not, but the larger answer is thinking about, again, how do we write this in a way that's appealing to as many people as possible? And of course, there's going to be people that struggle to read it for all sorts of reasons. And maybe there are future steps that can be taken to help with those issues.
Yeah, I think that there was a part of uh, I was holding in mind that if someone were to read this book without some of the text, would they be able to get some of the data? Now, that's not wholly true. This is not a purely visual infographic book. And I was sort of keeping in mind, and Shireen and I think to an extent, like as we were designing sort of the illustrations and so forth, how much can we convey visually so that the text is not the single thing that's carrying the information?
Thank you. Another audience member question was actually a comment that they want a comic strip in the newspaper to get a daily reminder on DBT skills. And, again, for us DBT nerds, we've got 5 functions, 5 things we're doing when we're doing DBT. In addition to the first 2, We've got something called skills generalization. So being able to apply skills across different situations and environments, and also structuring our environments to help us use skills and be effective. And so my question from this comment for you, Shireen and Jesse, is what do each of you do to remind yourself to use skills each day? Or how did you do that 25 years ago when you were first learning these skills? Because it's probably a lifestyle by now.
It is a lifestyle by now, but I have to say, my husband is reading this book, and he has now started pointing out to me the times when perhaps I could be practicing my skills.
Ooh,
It's
that's a good burn.
unfair, but it's unfair that this came up while we were on a vacation with my 80-year-old mother. So that I feel like I should be granted all sorts of exemptions in that
Well,
particular
he
case.
figured out a generalization opportunity for you.
I was not willing, let's just say. You have to be willing. So how do I think about the skills? I mean, I totally agree that at this point it's a language. It's a language that I speak, and so I'm constantly thinking about it. Probably how I did it 20 years ago was the fact that I was teaching it to other people. That was the way in which I started to adopt it for myself. So that's what helped me. Um, as family members in this group, I think immersing yourself in the videos and in the book, if you get it, in other resources, and just or in NEA PPD groups. I think it's like learning a language. I use this metaphor all the time. And when you're learning a language, practice is the most essential piece. You can't go to a language class once every 6 months and expect, and not practice it in between and expect to be able to speak in that other language. It has to be something that so maybe in addition to a comic strip, we can do a Duolingo for a skills group. That'll be our next venture.
I think similarly, I think one of the great privileges of being a DBT therapist is that you have to sort of walk the walk or walk the talk, whatever the phrase, like how I'm oriented, how the demand is to think dialectically and engage dialectically. Um, it's a demand of the treatment. And so I am persistently both reminded and reorienting myself to the skills, to the philosophy. Um, and so I think for me, that is a huge, impactful sort of reminder, retraining, skills building exercise. And sometimes I do worry, like, am I over indexing? Like, I do get comments from friends being like, stop talking to me like a therapist. Um, but, I guess I'd rather over index in that way than in other ways.
Over index?
This is a term that a client of mine has been using, and I'm taking to it. I don't know
Okay.
what does it mean. Like I'm jumping too far on one pole of sounding like I'm being too non-judgmental to the liking of my friends. How's that? That was the problem. A friend wanted to solicit judgments from me, and I refused.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, you can't come across as perfect. That's the hard part.
it's really easy for me apparently.
From doing
It's been
these
a
webinars,
long week, people. It's been a long week.
It's Friday.
happy Friday.
Happy Friday.
So from doing these webinars with NEA over the years, I don't actually have the data, but my sense is the most common question we get from audience members, from family members of people with BPD is my loved one won't do therapy. How do I get them to do it? And versions of this question are coming in through our Q&A. And so I feel like there is a tension of we don't have control and there is this, but what can I do? And so I just, in an open-ended way, want to ask each of you to speak to this valid want and need, and reality.
I feel like we get such mixed messages, and this is, I think, really within the self-help sphere
Mm,
around our impact on other people's behavior. I think either we're told that we can't do anything. I like let them, let people like just you can't control other people's emotions, minds, behavior, so screw it. And then I think we're on the other end. It's like, ways of mastering skills to get whatever you want. And I can imagine this is incredibly confusing. I find it confusing. And so I think that there is this dialectic that we have to hold, that yes, our behavior shapes and impacts those around us. There are things that we can do to potentially be effective in helping to elicit some of the things that we want. And there are limitations. We can't control someone else. And so I think for every person here asking themselves that question, that synthesis, that middle path is going to look really different. Really reflecting, okay, what is within my power I can do to impact someone's behavior? And how do I accept that fundamentally I can't control someone's behavior?
Thank you. Um, Another resource in addition to the Real Skills book that we mentioned is the Game of Real Life, which is like, I think, Apples to Apples or other citizens for, no, Cards Against Humanity, but with DBT skills. And Amy asked, would this be a good game activity for family members and teens to do together? And what if the family member hasn't been through DBT? I will say yes. I want to see what Jesse and Shireen say, but I will say yes. I give this as homework for teens I work with in DBT. However, you might go through the scenarios because there may be some adultish ones. I'm doing a Dear Man, the skill for asking for what you want with Jesse to see if we can get an expansion pack for teens. But Jesse, would you say that family members can participate if they've never heard of the skills?
I absolutely, I will say, and because similar to Andrea's experience, I tried playing this with a bunch of teens that I was leading in group, and I forgot some of the prompts. And but you know what? Teens love to be surprised. So what I will say is, you know, the card game is like a nice sort of useful, like real like preamble. I actually think that the book plus the cards is like a real nice, well-rounded way where you can go deep dive into the
Ooh.
skills, get that sort of foundation as a family member that's not necessarily doing multifamily skills group, not doing a comprehensive DBT, and then use that knowledge to help inform how you play the game.
Okay, I'm gonna Dear Man Amazon and get one of those bundles, buy both for a discount. I second that, doing those together. Great. Another audience question that is totally on brand for NEI BPD. Catherine shared that of all the DBT skills, she has been finding validation to be the most helpful in relating to her loved one. Does your book talk about validation?
We include that as one of our 26 skills. So, yes. And please tell us what you think if we did a decent job.
Okay. So Tammy references how we talk about practicing the skills. And many of us are beginners and families that require PhD level skills. So how do you practice at the preschool level?
Trying to think what that means. Like how do
Like you
you
need a lot of skills, but you don't have any skills yet.
I also personally take it to, if you're learning to surf, like as a skill, feeling like you are in a tsunami with planes coming crashing at you, and that's your reality, and that is not the time to learn to surf. What I
Yeah.
often talk to families is actually the way you learn to surf isn't in Hawaii, isn't with big waves. It's actually with the surfboard on the beach.
I
Yeah. And oh,
you go.
this was one of the reasons why we developed in the book the pathways or the flow charts in the beginning of the book, because we wanted to help. And this is something that actually has never been in the skills manual, though I think skilled DBT clinicians know how to do this. But the idea is that, there are dozens of DBT skills. And part of the overwhelm that can arise for people is like, I'm in a moment of crisis or I'm having an interpersonal problem and I don't even know what to do here, right? So the book is, 200 pages. How do I even find what I want? So that was the impetus for us developing some of these flowcharts, pathways, where it starts out with the issue of like, I'm in a crisis. What do I do? And if you answer yes, no questions along the way of the flowchart, you will arrive at a skill to try. And this might be the preschool version of what you're saying because it will help you arrive at a skill to try without a lot of thought, right? Without having to flip through 200 pages, but to answer a few questions and to say, okay, this is the skill I'm going to try right now. I realize every answer that I give is about the book, which I think is part of the reason of the webinar. I feel some unjustified guilt about that.
I like how you said it's unjustified. So let's keep acting opposite to it. I think there's also a dialectic of the flow charts help us with not just what the skill is, but what to do when. And that's something that I think is missing in a lot of places that teach DBT. So check out those flow charts. And those can be really helpful for when we're in emotion mind or when there's dysregulation in families to help us figure out what to do. The other part is the question asker clarified they meant simpler environments than my family to practice in. And I would think it's actually starting in maybe some easier situations and working your way up too. Jesse's nodding vigorously.
I'm nodding vigorously because I feel like this comes up so much in skills group where it's like we're in the distress tolerance module and invariably folks come in and be like, well, there was no crisis this week. I didn't have an opportunity to practice. And it's just like, I get that. And we want to use the opportunity to practice in the shallow end of the pool before we get into the deep end. That way we can see how, like, it's almost like trying on an outfit. We can see how it fits, how it feels. We can see how to move in it. And so the more we become accustomed to it, or even become aware of this skill, that means when the tornado is around us, I'm really mixing metaphors, you can swim. Um, yeah, okay. Andrea, I'm repeating what you said already.
Love it.
Please.
Okay. Speaking of preschool and PhD, I want to end with a little game that I think it was my wise mind, but it was heavily including my emotion mind came up with. So I remember learning from one of our NEA BPD podcasts, Charlie Swenson's To Hell and Back. I'll give a plug for that. That's on our website. That can really be another way if you're more of an auditory learner, that Charlie talks about real skills for real life in his own way. Abby, if you could put a link in the chat, I would super appreciate it. But one thing he says on one of his episodes is that Marshall Linehan had said, the way you get your PhD in DBT is being able to apply any skill in any situation. So I'm wondering, Shireen or Jesse, if one of you would be willing to share a problem in your life, a real life problem, and for the other one of you to take your book, blindfold yourself, close your eyes, mix it up, open it up, and point to a page. And we want that person with the problem to apply that skill to that problem. Are you guys up for this challenge?
We are up for it.
Who's got a problem? A challenge?
I mean, who doesn't have problems? Shireen, do you have a problem in mind?
I could come up with one.
Yeah, whatever you prefer. I got
Do
plenty.
you have a problem in mind?
I mean, I I think I think one. I mean, I'm happy to go first for it. I
Go
think
for it, Jesse.
okay. I think one problem that I'm experiencing is, and maybe this will sound familiar for folks. I moved into private practice, and the problem I'm experiencing is how to balance sort of my own personal like life with while building a practice, a business, and this real sort of competing tension to feel like I'm never not like I always ought to be working because now I'm working for myself versus I need space to actually sort of like live my life. Is that a clearly defined problem? Help me operationalize it.
You can't do it all. You feel like you need to be working all the time and you need space. And where are you getting stuck? What makes this a problem?
I just don't know. Like, I don't know where to draw the line.
Hmm.
All right, am I picking out a skill?
Close your eyes, turn the book so you don't know where it is. Open it up randomly and point. I'm going to predict, my guess, because I like making extra games within games, is it's going to be a mindfulness skill. But let's hear. Which one is it, Shireen?
Wow, Andrea, that was omniscient. Effectively. And also take a look at how beautiful the graphics are if you can see it. But okay,
Ooh.
Jesse, how would you use effectively, which is
I
a
th
mindfulness
I
skill?
thought you were supposed to tell me to how to use effectively.
Oh no. Well, you guys can decide, but
I
one of you.
this is all on me.
Well, you
Okay.
got
Well,
your
no, but this is a
feedback.
perfect skill for you
It
because the
is. This is
idea
an
of
easy one.
effectively is like, what do you need to do in order to be effective in reaching your goals?
I think that the the this is actually very helpful in that, like, I need to reorient myself to what my goals are. Right? Like, I think, like, when you are in the midst of so much change like I am, it's easy to forget, like, what is it that I'm moving towards? And
So the first
so
step says determine what your goal is, or something like that. I don't know if people can see it.
I guess my
What's
goal,
your goal?
yeah, my goal is I want to I want, like, a full connected life with friends and family, um, while being able to support myself and feel like I'm contributing to the DBT community, to the therapy community at large. Okay.
So
Yeah.
ultimately that practice, I realize we're at time, but that practice, the identification of the goals, and then you would walk through, I lost my page now, I turned it off, but would be to say, what do I need to do to act in accordance with those goals? And then to fully throw myself into those actions.
Mm.
Letting go of being right or perfect, Jesse.
It's so
Look, you
Yes.
learn
hard.
something from our book every day.
All right. Closing question for each of you. For somebody listening who's feeling stuck,
Mhm.
what's one step, one skill you'd like them to walk away with, or even an idea or feeling from this conversation you want them to walk away from today with?
Well, I want people to walk away with the idea. I know that what comes up so often, I looked at the Q&A, I know that this is the constant challenge for NEA BPD is the lack of access to resources. And so one of the things I want people to come away from this is that loads of people, but Jesse and I, as two of them, have spent a lot of time developing resources for people that are either free on our websites or low cost, with the hope of getting these skills to as many people who need them as possible or want them as possible. So I'm hoping that there's a little bit of hope that comes out of this, that there are things that are available to everybody to learn.
And I would just say that, like, stuckness is a thought. Change is the only constant. We are all changing. Everything is changing. And offer yourself some compassion for this experience of stuckness. I think both are really critical to hold in mind.
Thank you both. For people asking, do I share this book with my teen, my loved one? My wise mind says yes. And this webinar too. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you,
Thank
Andrea.
you,
Thank you,
everybody.
ABD.